The Best Teachings of the Buddha, A Path to Inner Peace and Timeless Wisdom. Introduction: Why Modern Life Craves Ancient Wisdom. In a world that never stops spinning, where stress, loneliness, and uncertainty are constant companions, many of us find ourselves quietly wondering, is there more to life than this? We chase dreams, fall in and out of relationships, pursue careers, and accumulate possessions. Yet, beneath all this effort, something feels missing. It's a silent emptiness that no achievement can truly satisfy. That quiet ache you sometimes feel when you're alone? That subtle discontent even in moments of success? You're not broken. You're human. And thousands of years ago, the Buddha understood this better than anyone. His teachings weren't just ancient words carved in stone. They were timeless truths about human suffering and the way out of it. In this article, we'll dive deep into the best teachings of the Buddha, not just to quote them, but to breathe life into them, apply them, and see how they can transform your everyday existence. We'll explore not only what the Buddha taught, but also why it still matters today, with real-life examples, personal reflections, and stories that might just shift the way you see everything. The reality of suffering, and why it's the first step to freedom. The Buddha didn't offer false promises or sweet illusions. He looked life straight in the eye and said something most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. Life is suffering. At first, that might sound bleak, depressing, even. But pause for a second. What if it's not a curse, but a key? What if the acknowledgement of suffering isn't the end, but the beginning of real freedom? Because the suffering the Buddha spoke of isn't just about catastrophes or physical pain. It's more subtle and more universal. It's the quiet ache behind your smile. The pressure to be enough. The invisible weight of expectations. It's waking up in the morning and already feeling behind. It's scrolling through social media and wondering why your life doesn't sparkle the same way. Real life example. Meet Sarah, a 32-year-old graphic designer in a major city. On paper, she's thriving. She's got a cool job at a creative agency, a thoughtful partner who brings her coffee every morning, and an apartment that could easily be featured in a lifestyle magazine. She's doing all the right things. But when the lights go off and the world goes quiet, something in her stirs. A restlessness. A question she can't quite answer. Is this it? She tries journaling, yoga, a new hobby, therapy. But the hollowness persists. Why? Because, like so many of us, she's chasing happiness through external milestones. Promotions, vacations, likes, validations. But fulfillment doesn't live out there. It's not in the next achievement or the next relationship. It's an inside job. Sarah's suffering is invisible, but it's real. And it's precisely the kind of suffering the Buddha was pointing to. That subtle, constant dissatisfaction that follows us no matter how well life seems to be going. My take. I think what strikes me most about this teaching is how liberating it actually is once you understand it. The moment we stop denying or numbing our suffering, we can finally start working with it. Not to escape it, but to understand it. To get curious. To ask, where is this pain really coming from? Personally, I've found that some of the most successful periods of my life were also the most disconnected. I was doing everything I thought I should do, ticking all the boxes, and yet, I felt like I was living someone else's story. That disconnect, that quiet, internal discomfort, is a signal. A message. A doorway. And maybe that's why the Buddha made this the first noble truth, not to discourage us, but to help us wake up. To say, you're not broken. You're just human. And your suffering is not the end of the road, it's the invitation to begin. 2. Understanding the root of suffering, craving and clinging. So now we know that life involves suffering. But the next question naturally follows. Why do we suffer? Why does someone like Sarah, who seems to have everything, still feel so lost? The Buddha gave us a clear answer in his second noble truth. It is craving which leads to repeated existence. Craving. Grasping. Clinging. We want. We want love. We want praise. We want success, beauty, certainty, youth, control. And once we get what we want to keep it. Forever. But here's the catch. Everything changes. People leave. Youth fades. Careers shift. Attention moves on. Yet we cling as if we can freeze time with our bare hands. And that's the root of our suffering, not the change itself, but our resistance to it. Real life reflection. Let me share something personal. For years, I craved approval, especially from my family. I wanted them to be proud, to understand my choices, to validate who I was becoming. Every decision I made, what to study, where to work, even what I posted online, was filtered through one lens. Will they approve of this? At first, it felt like motivation. But over time, it turned into a prison. I became anxious, resentful, exhausted. Because no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. Or if it was, the feeling didn't last. The peace came, not when they finally got it, but when I stopped needing them to. When I released the craving for external validation, I found space to breathe. It wasn't easy. Letting go never is. But it was necessary. Because the tighter I held on, the more I suffered. My take. The Buddha wasn't against desire. He understood that we're human, we'll always want things. But he pointed out a difference. Desire becomes suffering when it turns into attachment, when we need something to go our way in order to feel okay. Think about it. We want someone to love us, and when they do, we're terrified they might leave. We finally get the dream job, and then worry we'll mess it up. We build a life, a home, an identity, and panic at the thought of losing it. Clinging is like holding water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. Sometimes I think of life like a river. If you try to grab it, you end up with nothing. But if you float with it, accept the flow, embrace the changes, then you move with grace, not struggle. The Buddha didn't say don't love or don't dream. He simply said, don't hold on so tight. Because peace doesn't come from having everything go your way. Peace comes from letting go of the need for it to. 3. The possibility of ending suffering. Nirvana isn't what you think. So far, it might sound like life is just an endless loop of pain and disappointment. But here's where it all changes. The third noble truth is not doom and gloom. It's a promise. Suffering can end. Not in some faraway heaven. Not after 1,000 lifetimes. Here. Now. In this very breath. But let's be clear, ending suffering doesn't mean nothing bad ever happens again. It means that when life gets messy, and it will, you are no longer enslaved by your reactions. You are no longer ruled by craving, fear, or ego. It's not about escaping life. It's about being fully present in it, without being constantly thrown around by it. This state of deep inner freedom is what the Buddha called nirvana. Not a magical realm. Not a fantasy, but a mind unshaken, a heart at peace. A story, The Farmer and the Storm. There's a beautiful old parable I love. An elderly farmer watched a sudden storm destroy half his crops. His neighbor rushed over, exclaiming, "You must be devastated." The farmer simply said, "Maybe. Maybe not." The next day, the government arrived with financial aid for those who suffered crop damage. Because the storm hit him hardest, he received the most help he'd ever seen. The same neighbor came back. "Wow, you're so lucky." The farmer just smiled. "Maybe. Maybe not." You see, he wasn't numb. He wasn't cold. He was free. He had learned to ride the waves of change, rather than be pulled under by them. That, to me, is what nirvana looks like, not detachment from life, but a wise intimacy with it. A deep calm that remains, even as the world shifts around you. My take. When I first heard the word nirvana, I pictured some mystical place, clouds, lotus flowers, monks floating midair. But the more I studied and practiced, the more I realized nirvana isn't elsewhere. It's right here, when the mind stops grasping. And that realization changed everything. I started noticing small moments of peace. Sitting in traffic, but not getting angry. Receiving criticism, but not taking it personally. Watching plans fall apart, but feeling okay anyway. These were glimpses of nirvana, not in grand spiritual awakenings, but in the ordinary moments when I wasn't resisting life. I won't pretend I'm there all the time. Most days, I still cling. I still crave. But every time I let go, even a little, I taste freedom. And that taste is enough to keep going. In a world constantly telling us to chase more, fix ourselves, prove our worth, this teaching is revolutionary. You don't need to escape your life to find peace. You just need to stop fighting it. That's the heart of nirvana. Not perfection. Not paradise. Just peace with what is. 4. The path to freedom, the noble eightfold path in daily life. If suffering is the disease, then the Buddha gave us a cure. A practical, doable, step-by-step guide to inner peace. It's not reserved for monks or mystics, it's meant for everyday people living real lives. This is the noble eightfold path. Not a set of commandments. Not dogma. But a path, something you walk, day by day, step by step. And it begins right where you are. The Eightfold Path. 1. Right view, seeing life clearly, not through filters of ego or fear. 2. Right intention, letting go of anger, greed, and harming, cultivating compassion. 3. Right speech, speaking with honesty, kindness, and purpose. 4. Right action, acting in ways that reflect integrity. 5. Right livelihood, earning a living without harming others. 6. Right effort, putting energy into what uplifts, not what drags you down. 7. Right mindfulness, being fully present, aware of body, mind, and surroundings. 8. Right concentration, deepening mental clarity through practices like meditation. It's not about being perfect. It's about walking with intention, choosing awareness over autopilot, kindness over reactivity, wisdom over impulse. A modern-day practice, the barista's path. You might think, I'm not a monk. I make coffee for a living. What does Buddhism have to do with me? Everything. Imagine you're a barista in a busy cafe. High beverage, right speech, you greet each customer with warmth, even when they're distracted or rude. You use your words to connect, not to cut. Open hands, right livelihood, you take pride in serving, knowing you're offering something small that makes someone's day a bit better. Direct hit, right mindfulness, you grind the beans, steam the milk, and pour with full attention. The act becomes a meditation. Repeat button, right effort, you notice when irritation arises after the 5th extra hot almond milk, no foam order, and instead of snapping, you breathe and soften your tone. That is walking the path. Not in a temple, but in a cafe. Not in silence, but in the bustle of daily life. My take. When I first learned about the Eightfold Path, I thought it was something abstract, like a spiritual syllabus you had to memorize. But now I see it differently. It's more like a compass. It doesn't matter where you are, lost in grief, stressed at work, stuck in traffic, it always points you toward freedom. And the most beautiful thing? You don't have to walk all 8 steps perfectly. You just have to take one step in the right direction. For me, it started with right speech, watching how I talk, both to others and to myself. I noticed how often I complained, gossiped, or judged. When I started shifting those habits, even a little, something opened up inside. I felt lighter. More in control. More awake. You see, this path isn't about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering the clarity and compassion that were always inside you. Final thought. The Eightfold Path doesn't take you away from life, it brings you more deeply into it. With each mindful word, each compassionate choice, each moment of awareness, you are not just living. You are walking toward freedom. And the best part? You can start right now. With this breath. With this choice. With this cup of coffee. The impermanence and non-self, why letting go sets you free. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. The Buddha. Everything changes. Everything ends. And that's not a threat, it's a truth. A doorway. A kind of quiet liberation that few of us are taught to see. Think about it. The laughter of a child. The warmth of summer. The sting of heartbreak. The thrill of falling in love. None of it lasts. And that's what makes it all so precious. In Buddhism, this is called anicca, the law of impermanence. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something to live in harmony with. Our struggle with change. But most of us fight change. We fear it. We resist it. We chase youth. We avoid grief. We cling to identities, titles, and roles, desperate to feel solid in a world that keeps shifting. Take aging, for example. In today's youth-obsessed culture, growing old is treated almost like a personal failure. The gray hairs must be dyed. The wrinkles must be erased. But what if aging isn't the problem? What if the real suffering comes from the expectation that we should stay young forever? Nature doesn't cling. The tree doesn't mourn its leaves when autumn comes. The moon doesn't apologize for waning. So why do we? A personal insight, the identity trap. For a long time, I clung to a specific identity. The smart one. The one who always had the answer. The one people admired for their insight. It made me feel valuable. Safe. But here's the problem. The moment I didn't know something. The moment I made a mistake or didn't live up to that image. I didn't just feel embarrassed, I felt worthless. That's when I realized I had built a prison out of my own ego. The bars weren't real, but they held me tight. I was constantly performing, defending, protecting this fragile image of me. And then, I came across the Buddhist concept of anatta, non-self. The idea that the self is not a fixed, permanent thing. It's a flow. A process. A dance of body, thoughts, feelings, memories, all of which are changing. At first, that idea shook me. If I'm not this identity, then who am I? But over time, I saw the gift hidden inside. If the self isn't fixed, then I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to defend a role. I don't have to be the smart one, the successful one, the funny one, or any label at all. I can just be. And in that space, I found something I'd been searching for all along: peace. Letting go equals freedom. Letting go doesn't mean we lose ourselves. It means we stop gripping so tightly that we forget how to breathe. It means allowing life to change, knowing that it was always going to anyway. It means accepting that we are more like rivers than statues, always flowing, always evolving. Imagine how much lighter we'd feel if we stopped clinging to every passing moment, every passing emotion, every fleeting version of ourselves. Impermanence isn't just an idea, it's a friend that teaches us to love deeply, live presently, and release gracefully. Final thought. When you stop fighting change, you begin to experience freedom. When you stop defending an ego, you begin to discover truth. And when you embrace impermanence and non-self, you realize, I don't need to be anything other than aware, awake, and here. Because everything is already flowing perfectly. And you, too, are part of that beautiful, ever-changing dance. 6. The mind creates the world, understanding the mirror within. All experiences are preceded by the mind, led by the mind, made by the mind. Dhammapada. Pause and let that sink in for a moment. The world you experience, the joy, the sorrow, the chaos, the calm, doesn't begin out there. It begins in here. In your mind. Your thoughts, perceptions, beliefs, and reactions are not just responses to the world, they actively shape it. The mirror metaphor. Imagine your mind as a mirror. When it's clear and polished, it reflects the world as it truly is, full of nuance, beauty, and depth. But when it's dusty, clouded by greed, fear, anger, or delusion, everything you see appears distorted. You misinterpret people's intentions. You obsess over the past. You anticipate threats where none exist. The tragedy? Most people spend their lives trying to fix the reflection, blaming their boss, their partner, their luck, their circumstances. But the wise? They clean the mirror. A modern analogy, social media feeds. Think of how social media works. Your feed reflects your clicks, your interests, and yes, your fears. Engage with outrage, and you'll get more outrage. Follow envy-inducing accounts, and you'll keep feeling not enough. It's not just what you see, it's how your inner world is being shaped. But when you intentionally shift your attention toward gratitude, mindfulness, compassion, your digital world starts to look different. Your mind works the same way. Where attention goes, energy flows. You are, quite literally, curating your own reality. Story: The Candle and the Wind. There's a powerful tale of a meditator who lived near a noisy village. Every day, he grumbled. The children are too loud. The dogs never stop barking. How can I meditate in this chaos? He begged a nearby monk for advice. The monk listened patiently and said, "The noise isn't disturbing your mind. Your mind is disturbing the noise." At first, the meditator was stunned. But then, he began to observe. He stopped trying to push the sound away and started observing his reaction to it. Over time, something amazing happened. The noise didn't disappear, but his suffering did. Why? Because his resistance faded. He had cleaned his mirror. My personal reflection. I'll be honest, this teaching hit me hard. For years, I thought my anxiety was caused by the world, by stressful work, by difficult people, by unpredictable events. But slowly, through mindfulness, I realized it wasn't the world, it was the way my mind was meeting the world. The moment I started working with my mind, rather than trying to control everything outside, I experienced a shift. Not dramatic at first, but subtle and steady. I became less reactive, more compassionate, more centered, even when things around me weren't. Final thought. The Buddha wasn't offering you a fantasy escape. He was offering you a mirror. And here's the beauty. You don't have to wait for the world to change in order to feel peace. You just have to turn inward. Watch the mind. Tend to it with care. And slowly, you begin to realize the world I live in is the one my mind creates. Polish the mirror. Not to avoid life, but to finally see it as it truly is, and to see yourself clearly, too. 7. The middle path, wisdom beyond extremes. Avoid both sensual indulgence and self-torture. Walk the middle path. The Buddha. The story of the Buddha himself is not just one of enlightenment, it's one of balance, hard-won through lived experience. Born into wealth, he had every luxury imaginable. But he realized indulgence didn't bring happiness, it only numbed the deeper ache. So he went to the other extreme, harsh asceticism. Fasting until his body wasted away, denying all comfort in the pursuit of liberation. And still, no peace. Until one day, weak and near death, he accepted a bowl of rice from a village girl. In that moment, something profound clicked. Neither extreme led to freedom. But the middle way did. Why this teaching is more relevant than ever. Today, we don't live in forests or palaces, but we swing between extremes more than ever. We work ourselves to burnout, then binge on distractions. We obsess over productivity, then collapse into apathy. We pursue success until we forget joy, then chase pleasure until we feel empty again. Sound familiar? We crave balance, but we don't know how to live it. The middle path is not about walking a tightrope between indulgence and denial. It's about wisdom. It's about knowing, in each moment, what's enough. And acting from clarity, not compulsion. Example, balance in a busy life. Let's say you're a single parent, juggling 2 jobs, trying to stay healthy, raise your kids, and not lose yourself in the process. The middle path isn't about quitting your job and meditating in the Himalayas. It's about living with awareness right here, in the chaos. Choosing nourishing meals, but not hating yourself when you order takeout. Resting when you're tired, without labeling it lazy. Working hard, without tying your self-worth to your productivity. Loving your children fiercely, without losing the ability to love yourself. Balance isn't found in perfection. It's found in presence. In those small, quiet decisions we make each day, not from fear or guilt, but from wisdom and care. Story: the log that floated to the ocean. The Buddha once gave a beautiful metaphor. The spiritual path is like a log drifting down a river. If the log doesn't cling to either bank, sink beneath the water, or get stuck on rocks, it will eventually reach the vast, open ocean. Those riverbanks? They represent extremes: pleasure and pain, pride and self-loathing, control and collapse. Our job is not to fight the current or cling to the shore. It's to float mindfully, avoiding entanglement. To stay present and keep moving. And just like the log, if we stay true to the middle way, we too will reach something vast, not the ocean of water, but the ocean of inner freedom. My personal reflection. For years, I thought success meant pushing harder. No rest. No room for softness. Just hustle. And when I burned out, I'd swing to the other side, unplug, escape, binge on entertainment, pretend I didn't care. Neither felt like peace. Neither was sustainable. The shift came when I stopped seeing life as a battle between extremes and started asking, what does balance look like today? What would a kind, wise decision feel like right now? Some days it meant working deeply. Other days, taking a nap. Not from laziness, but from self-trust. And in that space, I began to discover a new kind of strength, quiet, centered, deeply rooted. Final thought. The middle path isn't boring. It's not lukewarm. It's the most radical, courageous, and sane way to live. Because it invites you to stop swinging from extreme to extreme. And finally come home to yourself. In a world that profits from imbalance, choosing balance is an act of rebellion and of deep wisdom. 8. Buddha nature, the hidden jewel within. All beings have Buddha nature. They only need to uncover it. Mahaparinirva Sutra. Of all the teachings in Buddhism, this may be the most radical and the most comforting. You are not broken. You are not missing anything. You do not need to earn, chase, or fabricate enlightenment. You already have it. According to Mahayana Buddhism, every being, yes, you, possesses an inner jewel. A luminous, pure, unshakable nature that is calm, wise, and compassionate. This is your Buddha nature. Why don't we feel it? If we're already whole, why do we feel so lost? Because our Buddha nature is often buried, covered by layers of fear, anger, shame, craving, self-doubt. Like a diamond hidden beneath mud, the jewel doesn't disappear. It's just obscured. And unfortunately, most of us spend our lives polishing the mud instead of uncovering what's beneath it. Story: the lost jewel in the coat. There's a beloved parable in Buddhist texts. A poor man wandered the world in poverty, unaware that years ago, a generous friend had secretly sewn a priceless jewel inside his coat. He struggled, begged, and believed he was worthless until someone finally pointed it out. He reached into his coat and realized he had been rich all along. You are that man. Your mind is that coat. And your Buddha nature is the jewel. The true purpose of spiritual practice. This changes everything. Spirituality isn't about becoming some perfect version of yourself. It's about remembering who you already are, beneath the noise, the fear, the mental stories. Meditation? It's not about escape, it's about clearing the mud. Mindfulness? Not a trendy habit, but a tool for returning to your essence. Compassion? Not a duty, but your natural state, once the clutter is removed. You don't need to add anything to yourself. You simply need to remove what isn't truly you. My personal reflection. I used to think I had to achieve peace. That I had to work hard, prove my worth, get rid of all my flaws before I could feel whole. But the deeper I went into practice, the more I began to sense something beneath the surface. A stillness that was always there. A part of me that didn't need fixing, just discovering. There were moments in deep meditation, or in silence with nature, or even just sitting quietly with my breath, where I felt it. That gentle, luminous awareness. Not striving. Just being. Not perfect. Just true. And I realized, I don't need to build myself from scratch. I just need to come home to who I already am. Final thought. You are not your wounds. You are not your mistakes. You are not the voices in your head telling you you're not enough. You are vast awareness, hidden beneath temporary clouds. You are a loving presence, forgotten in the noise of the world. You are a Buddha in disguise, waiting, not to become something new, but to remember something ancient. So don't search for your worth in the world's opinion. Don't wait for peace to arrive after you fix yourself. Just begin to notice the jewel within. It's already shining.